identify them. Joining me now from Orlando is Boston Globe reporter Wesley Lowery. And here in studio is Eugene O'Donnell, former police officer. Thank you both for being here tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Wesley, this is an incredible story. So the FBI shot this man, and he had just admitted that he and the Boston bomber committed the 3 murders in Waltham.
Correct, and those were grisly murders unsolved for years that occurred on the 10th anniversary of the September 11th attack. It came out soon after Tamerlan Tsarnaev was named bombing suspect that some of his best friends had been killed in this murder. Now, last night, it seems that the second suspect was here in Orlando, preparing to admit to this grisly crime when he just snapped, attacked an FBI agent, and was shot and killed just feet away from where I'm standing right now. So this has been a massive development.
Wesley, you're there in Orlando. What else can you tell us about what he said to he actually said to the agents?
You know, the details are still trickling out. NBC has been up front with a lot of this. The Globe has gotten a lot of it as well. What we know so far, or what we believe so far, is that he is prepared, was potentially about to sign a confession to this triple homicide in Waltham, just outside of Boston, when something snapped, something happened, he got angry, threatened the officer, injured the officer, and that is when he was shot and killed.
Now, Eugene, it's a bloody triple murder, and the police never came up with a suspect. And now we find out the Boston bomber has now been, he's been pointed out by his own accomplice in this gruesome crime. I mean, what does this tell us about these guys if they did indeed do it?
It raises questions about who these guys really are, whether this is ideological at all. Are these people just psychopaths? Are they organized criminals? Were they using the money to fund terrorist activities? So what their motivation is, and obviously the larger question is going to be, would this Boston bombing have been prevented had these guys, they've been brought to justice earlier?
Now, what happens now? Are they going back to the scene to see if others were involved?
Yes, I mean, this is no stone being left unturned, and I assume law enforcement now has to start double-checking cases of all kinds, because this is the intersection now of ordinary street criminal activity and the possibility that some of those people might be involved in more sinister kinds of activities. So this is kind of a crucial in American history in terms of criminal activity, right, and the overlap with that, with terrorism.
Let me ask you one more question, Eugene. You remember during our coverage of the Boston bomber here, he was missing at the funeral. Now, this was a mutual friend that had said to reporters this was his best friend, but he was not at the funeral. Quote, this is what a mutual friend says. He was somebody who was in contact with Brendan on a daily basis. Anybody like that, you would think he would have been around. Tam wasn't there at the memorial service. He wasn't at the funeral. He wasn't around at all, and he was really close to Brendan. That's why it's so weird. This starts to make more sense today.
Certainly does. I mean, and it appears they didn't have suspects initially, but if this is true, this is quite a dramatic trail that eventually leads to this guy.
Wesley, what about the cell phones? I understand that the cell phones were found.
Correct. This is how they tracked down Ibragim Todashev. Exactly. Yeah, when they seized Tamerlan Tsarnaev's phone records, they saw that there had been calls and contact between, potentially before the bombing, maybe after the bombing, but that's unclear. There had been contact between Tamerlan Tsarnaev with Ibragim Todashev, which is what led them down here to Orlando to interview him, to keep an eye on him. This was, to our understanding, not the first time he'd been interviewed by the FBI, but a subsequent interview, and that's how they found him, is through Tamerlan Tsarnaev's phone records.
Eugene, what would these cell phone records mean in an investigation?
Well, they give you some sense of how many times they speak, the relationship they may have. You get some ideas of where they moved to and where they were coming from, and you get some insights into who else is in the network. And obviously, as we said before, in this kind of case, they know everything about these bombers. So if they did any kind of minor infractions, that's all going to come up. This is the most investigated case in recent American history.
So you're saying this could change some of how we see the Boston bomber? He could have been a psychopath, I think you said. He could have been just some guy that was into violence, because this does not appear ideological at all. This is a drug heist or attempted drug heist that went into a triple murder.
A very bloody one in which he tried to, the attempt was to kill these people as witnesses. So is this a criminal gang? Is there terrorism? In other countries, there is overlap.
Right.
So this is more intriguing by the minute, really.
And Wesley, this was a huge story in Boston with no suspects, Al, for a long time after it happened in 2011.
Of course, for years. For years, no suspects, unclear how it happened. And again, it wasn't until after the Boston bombing that Tamerlan Tsarnaev was named. I want to say BuzzFeed may have had this first, or reporter Rosie Gray, but it was the first time that his name had formally been linked to it. And now the FBI has told us that both Tamerlan Tsarnaev as well as the suspect down here in Orlando had been considered suspects, potentially had been talked to, but they didn't have enough. And now, years later, it's starting to be pieced together.
Now, do we know if they were able to question Ibrahim about what the communications were between him and the bomber with the cell phone conversations? Because you said he talked to the FBI more than once.
It's unclear what exactly he told them. According to his friends who were out here near the scene, based on the local news reports, they said that he had spoken to them before, that he had admitted to having spoken to Tamerlan Tsarnaev, although there's no evidence to suggest that he had any knowledge of the bombing plot, at least not at this point in time. But again, it's still very unclear.
Right. There's one cautionary note. The word of somebody alone is not tremendously valuable, so you want to have corroboration and make sure there's supportive evidence.
Wesley Lowery from the Boston Globe and Eugene O'Donnell from John Jay College. It's a fascinating story. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.